The dog stepped out of the shadows just as the first light of a winter morning broke across the empty yard. Frost clung to its coat, and each breath rose in thin, trembling clouds. It limped, favoring the same leg he remembered, moving slowly, as if unsure the world was safe enough to cross. The veteran stopped mid-step. His boots sunk into the snow, but he didn't feel the cold. He simply stared, breath hanging in the air, heart thudding against the stillness. The dog paused too, lowering its head, its tail barely shifting in a hesitant sway. Its eyes held a quiet recognition, something fragile and unchanged by the years. A branch cracked somewhere behind them. The wind brushed past, carrying a thin, familiar scent that made the veteran's chest tighten. The dog took one more step, then another, each movement careful, almost apologetic. He swallowed, unable to move, unable to believe. His voice came out as a whisper, thin as the cold air between them. "It's you, isn't it?" He started his mornings the same way every day. He filled the kettle, listened to its slow rumble, and watched steam drift toward the window. Then he stepped onto the porch, brushing away the thin layer of frost that settled there overnight. The wood creaked beneath his weight, familiar and worn, much like the rhythm of his days. He checked the yard, scanned the quiet trees, and looked down at the old metal bowl tucked near the steps. He never used it anymore, but he never moved it either. It stayed where it had always been, a small reminder of a moment he tried not to think about, yet never fully let go of. He took a sip of tea, the warmth steadying his hands. The silence around him felt comfortable, predictable, almost protective. This was how life had been for years, one quiet morning folded into the next. Until that morning, when he noticed the bowl was not where he had left it. It had been years ago, on a cold, rain-soaked road just outside the old training grounds. He remembered hearing a faint scratching sound before he saw anything. When he stepped closer, his flashlight caught the shape of a small dog tied to a broken fence post, its fur drenched and clinging to its trembling body. The pup didn't bark or growl. It simply watched him with wide, exhausted eyes, shivering so hard its bones seemed to rattle. He knelt beside it, feeling the rope dig into his palm as he worked the knot loose. The dog winced, but didn't pull away. Its legs were weak, one of them bent at an angle that made him wince too. He wrapped it in his jacket, shielding it from the rain, and set down half of his rations beside it. The dog ate slowly, as if unsure the food was real. For a moment they just stared at each other, two frightened beings sharing the same patch of stormy night. Then the pup rested its head briefly against his hand, a silent gesture of trust that struck him deeper than he expected. By morning, when he returned with more food, the pup was gone. Only the torn piece of rope he had cut lay in the mud, swaying gently in the wind. The years began to slip by, marked first by the last heavy rains, then the early snows that settled across the quiet valley. 4 winters came and went, each one piling a little more distance between him and that night on the road. He returned to civilian life, finding comfort in routines that asked nothing of him except patience and silence. He told himself he had forgotten the pup. Life moves on, he would say, even when something inside him insisted on remembering. That insistence showed in small habits he never broke. He kept the old metal bowl near the steps. He left scraps near the fence during harsh weather. Sometimes he even found himself glancing at the tree line without meaning to. The memory faded, but it never disappeared. It settled into him quietly, becoming part of the background of his days. And though he never admitted it aloud, a small part of him still listened for footsteps that never came. The first sign came quietly, almost too small to notice. When he stepped onto the porch that morning, the frost around the old bowl was disturbed, the thin crust broken by something that had moved in the night. The bowl itself was empty, not unusual during storm seasons, but it was shifted a few inches toward the door, as if nudged by a careful nose. He frowned, brushing his thumb along the rim. Maybe a stray cat had wandered through. Maybe the wind had caught it just right. He tried to dismiss it, tried to convince himself it was nothing more than coincidence. But then he noticed the faint tracks leading across the yard, pressed into the soft layer of melted frost. They were small, scattered, hesitant. Not the prints of a large stray, not the rough pads of a wild animal. These were familiar, too familiar. And the night before, just before he drifted to sleep, he thought he heard a soft whine carried through the trees, a sound he hadn't heard in years. This time he couldn't ignore it. He set out just after sunrise, flashlight in hand, even though the light had already started to spread across the trees. Old habits made him cautious. He followed the faint tracks through the yard and toward the forest edge, moving slowly so he wouldn't disturb anything that might help him understand what had come in the night. At the tree line, the prints scattered, fading into patches of frozen ground and leaves. He knelt, brushing his fingers along one of the clearer impressions. The size, the spacing, the slight drag on one side. It stirred a memory he had tried to bury. He walked farther, checking the old dirt road where the pup once followed him, checking the ridge where strays rarely wandered. A neighbor passing by shook his head when asked if he had seen any dogs around. Nothing unusual, he said, nothing new. He kept going anyway. Something inside him refused to stop. Along the fence near the back field, where the posts leaned like tired shoulders, he caught sight of a small tuft of fur snagged on the wood, brown with a whisper of gray, soft, familiar in a way that tightened his chest. It was the first real clue, and it pulled him forward. He reached the small clearing behind the ridge, the place where the tracks seemed to gather before disappearing completely. The ground was undisturbed, the air still, nothing but the quiet sway of branches overhead. He turned in a slow circle, searching for any sign, any movement. But the forest stared back at him with empty silence. He exhaled, shaking his head at himself, ready to turn back. Then, just as he stepped away, a faint sound drifted through the trees. Not a twig snapping, not the wind. A soft, low whine carried across the clearing, thin but unmistakable. He froze. The doubt slipped away as quickly as it had come. He headed back to the house with a new heaviness in his steps, but it wasn't from doubt anymore. It was the weight of knowing he couldn't ignore what he had heard. Inside, he reached for the coat he kept by the door, the one with the worn pocket where an old whistle still rested. He hadn't used it in years, yet his fingers found it easily, as if they had been waiting for this moment. He slipped the flashlight into his other hand, checked the batteries out of habit, and tightened the collar of his coat against the cold. For a long second he stood still, breathing in, letting the truth settle. Whether he found the dog or only the end of a memory, he needed to know. He needed to finish what had started all those years ago. He stepped outside again and lifted the whistle to his lips. One steady blow carried into the trees, sharp and clear. Somewhere far beyond the fence line, a faint echo answered. He followed the faint echo deeper into the trees, moving slowly, unsure of what he would find. The forest ahead seemed to hold its breath. Then, between two tall birches, a shape stepped into view. A dog, thin and weathered, its fur streaked with age and cold. It limped forward, the same leg dragging slightly, just as it had all those years ago. He stopped instantly. The cold air stilled around him. The dog froze too, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment between them. For a long second, neither of them moved. They simply looked at each other from across the clearing, two lives meeting again where neither expected. The dog shifted first. Its tail gave a hesitant, uneven tremble. Its ears tilted in recognition, lowering not in fear, but in the soft way a creature bows to memory. It took a step, then another, slow, measured, almost painful. Snow pressed under its paws, each movement careful, almost asking for permission to come closer. He felt his breath catch, rising in a pale cloud between them. His eyes narrowed not in doubt but in disbelief as he watched the dog approach in the exact same pattern it once used when it trusted him for the first time. A small circle, a pause, a tilt of the head. When they were only a few feet apart, the dog stopped. Its chest rose and fell in short, uneven breaths. He lowered himself slightly, not reaching out, just letting the moment settle. The dog leaned forward, nose twitching, searching the air for a scent it remembered. Their eyes met fully then, steady and unbroken. Breath met breath in the cold morning air. He swallowed hard, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. His voice cracked when it finally came out, soft and almost afraid to disturb the stillness. "I knew you'd find your way back." The dog took another small step toward him, then circled once in the snow. The movement was slow and uneven, but unmistakable. It was the same circle it had made the night he freed it from the fence post, a cautious loop of trust before settling near his feet. He watched, breath tight in his chest, as the dog completed the loop and lowered its head just slightly, exactly as it once did. Then the dog backed away, turning toward the path that led to his porch. It reached beneath a low plank with its nose and pulled out a small frayed piece of rope, the same rope he had cut years earlier when he freed it from the fence post. The edges were weathered and stiff, but the torn fibers were unmistakable. It dropped it gently at his feet and looked up at him with eyes that held no doubt, no hesitation, only recognition. There was no question now. The years had passed, life had changed, but the memory had stayed alive, carried in the heart of the one creature he never expected to see again. He sat down slowly on the porch steps, the cold wood pressing through his coat. The dog settled beside him without hesitation, its breathing soft and uneven. The gentle rise and fall matched the quiet rhythm of the early morning. The sky was beginning to brighten, a thin line of pale gold stretching across the horizon and pushing back the last shadows of night. He didn't reach out or speak. He didn't need to. The dog shifted closer on its own, resting its head near his boot, as if this place had always been waiting for it to return. The warmth of its presence filled the empty space beside him, a silent comfort he hadn't realized he missed. They stayed like that for a long time, watching the frost melt on the grass, watching the world wake up around them. No questions, no demands, just two beings sharing the same quiet moment, grateful for the years that had led them back to each other. Whether the dog stayed for a day or forever didn't matter. For now, it was here, and that was enough. Some bonds never break,
They simply wait for the right moment to find their way back.